Okay, now the timer's starting. Okay, hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about two different audiences and how we should approach them. The first one's going to be about how do we approach those that are not interested at all in protecting themselves. And the second one audience that we'd like to speak to is how do we approach those who want to learn but are afraid to carry an instrument that would really hurt someone. So now we have April and Andy with us today, and they're going to give us their ideas on how they would go about approaching these people, and maybe some other thoughts. So we're just all gonna talk together here, and whenever we feel like it on this subject. So who would like to go first, Andy or April?
Well, I'd like to start by saying that I think that's one of the most difficult audiences to approach would be the people who aren't interested or really afraid to carry a weapon or even try to protect themselves. There are three really important things that self-defense will do for a woman. And probably the most important is it gives them the ability to defend themselves and their family. It builds confidence to know that their life and their family are important enough to fight for. And the last thing I think that it gives most people is a discipline, just learning how to use the firearm and disciplining yourself enough to practice and to be successful at doing so. So, and I think of several people in my life that I would think would be hard people to try to convince,
Yeah.
And one would be, the person who would say, well, I just leave it up to God. I would just pray about it.
Yeah.
And, as far as trying to convince these people, I think that would be a difficult scenario.
Yeah. It's a victimization kind of mentality. It's not, it amazes me. It's like we were talking earlier. Is we came from a pioneering spirit, and it's been bred out of us that now you rely on some outside force to fix your problem. So and people don't think that way anymore. They don't think, I think a lot of, the Me Too movement's fine, but it doesn't give the solutions. And the solutions are pretty simple, don't be a victim. That should be the mentality people should have. And it needs to go further than just making people aware of these horrible crimes.
Mm-hmm. Sort of take responsibility for yourself rather than leaving it in the hands of...
these people that get away with this are encouraged by people that, that are victims or choose to... It's it's a mindset that you have, to not
sure.
be a victim.
And so many times you see the predators take advantage of a gun-free zone.
Oh, absolutely.
And they know which schools, which malls, which sports events and all that to go to, where they're more or less given an open door,
Right. But and it doesn't, not that the Second Amendment isn't, in my eyes, the most important amendment there is because it protects all the rest. But there is a whole genre of self-defense. You can, I know April's taking self-defense classes. That there's a lot of things you can do. It's just being aware of the situation and.
That's your first step.
Yeah.
But,
and that's also something you have to practice is the situational awareness. It's not something that a lot of times comes natural to people. It's something that you can practice, like we said last time, just to position yourself in a room where you can see what's going on and you can see who walks in the door. It's just thinking of little things like that can really help you out.
That's one of the major things that I've noticed is the psychological part of it. Like when you try to discuss this with people that are not interested in learning how to protect themselves at all, then I like to try to start with this idea. So you're in a mall and you're not going to notice a suspicious character because you're not interested at all. And if somebody is obviously acting very strange and they look like they might have something on them, you're not going to like start to position yourself. And if you have your children with you, look, are you just going to run? Or, you know, if you're not close to the door, what are you going to do?
Right.
Are you going to think these things through? Because this is the way the world is changing. It's the way it is today, sorry to say. And I'm not saying that people should go every place scared to death. I'm not trying.
No, just be aware.
I'm just saying being aware with confidence is someplace where we need to get our minds built back up to.
What already
We used to be that way,
Right,
you know?
It already puts you one step ahead. You know, you're already sort of thinking in that direction. So rather than them getting the jump on you as far as element of surprise, you're kind of one step ahead at that point if you're already looking for things that don't fit in or things that seem strange. But to try to convince somebody of that is I think one of the hardest things.
Yeah, and it's the importance to start from square one, like to really take notice of and compare ourselves to, like what Andy was saying, where we used to be and where we are now. There's a big, huge gap.
It's almost like it has been bred out of us.
Yeah.
You know, and we need somebody from the outside to come in and help us.
Yeah.
We've been more and more conditioned to rely on the government for protection or, you know, anything else like that. So, yeah, I think eventually it does sort of get bred out of the norm of people.
And it's encouraged, you know, I think it encourages the criminal because they don't, you see people that will intimidate, and they only intimidate people that they can intimidate. You know, it changes quickly when they realize they don't have the upper hand anymore.
Well, I was one of those people, and now I'm learning as I go along, and I'm trying to share with other people, and I try to be as honest as possible because I was terrified of learning how to protect myself. But then I realized that at some point I was just going to keep backing myself in the corner and backing myself in the corner until I was so paranoid psychologically that I couldn't go anywhere. And you know, in situations like that, the way I used to be, someone like me would, if there was a crisis in a situation, just a one-on-one crisis, or in a public environment, I would have frozen. I'd have been one of those people that said I wouldn't do anything. I would freeze, even if I had my children, you know.
Well, now you have another option.
That's exactly the point in some ways, because you don't naturally, your emotions can overtake you. So you really do have to think these things out. And of course, if you take like April has, you know, self-defense classes and stuff like that, those things occupy your mind instead of fear.
You kind of go back to your training, and not that I've had a whole lot of it, but yeah, those things stick in your mind for sure. And I think along with, you know, protecting yourself with a, you know, firearm, you know, to be trained in some self-defense move is definitely gonna benefit you. You need like a whole correlation of different.
I never understood why the women's movement never encouraged that. You know, I mean,
I never understood that.
I find that, you know, to be absolutely liberating.
Yeah.
I mean, the feeling of, you know, nobody's going to be able to physically dominate you is to me, that's liberating.
That's
That would
supposed to be, yeah.
you know, that should be the goal. And it's in our culture, in some ways the women's movement is militant, you know, in the sense of, I don't know, I was years ago, a French woman said this to me, and I found it interesting. She said, you know, we as French women have been liberated, but we don't want to be men. And it's like there's almost a competition, or you have to dislike men, and sometimes it becomes militant. And you know, but it's not about really taking steps to keep things from happening to women. As you know what I mean? Like there's not, you know, like I said, the Me Too movement just kind of falls off with "I was a victim."
Yeah,
And
that's what happened out of all that.
And it doesn't, you know, it doesn't say, hey, well, you know, how do you become not a victim? And that's what we're talking about here. You know.
I agree, because, you know, they got to a certain point, like, I came from the people that developed the feminist movement and in that period, and I remember we, you know, bragged we wanted to do everything the guys did and all that stuff as far as the sexual revolution and everything. But then we became victims, because then was born the unwed mother with these children, and you had no mate, and they were alone and left. And then through all the equal stuff, divorces were like uncontested, and you had no money either, you know, when you had the kids, and you had no rights, and so you had to go through all that. And then, so as a result, just like you said, wanted to do everything like the men, but it made us into victims, you know. And now they're mad because they wanted. It's so confusing. It's gotten all confused. But what got lost in that forest, somewhere in the woods there, was the fact that they did this to become stronger, and have stronger minds, and not just going out and screaming and demonstrating is not demonstrating strength to me. I mean, we're ready to be redefined. You know, we've been like this from the 60s, and have some pretty good examples of stuff that needs readjusted big time. So we have to go back and learn from our grandmothers and our great-grandmothers and the pioneer women that were here. We have to learn their strengths, you know. And to me, we lost a lot psychologically since the 60s. But we can redo it, and we can redefine it, but we have to notice first, somewhere along the lines, our perceptions got changed, and our whole psychological makeup got changed, you know. And we have to believe that we have a right to, protect ourselves and our children. I mean, so many women I talk to, they're like, I would just have to stand there in a crisis situation and let them do. What kind of answer is this, you know?
We didn't come from that.
No, and it's a total victim mentality to begin to think that way. And in order to change that, I think I think with things like what you're doing and just making people aware and talking about it, you're a perfect example, because you came from a place where you were one of those people, you know, and now you're not any longer. And so you're a perfect one to start something like that and try to educate people.
Yeah, my ancestors gave that knowledge to me, and I rejected it then in the 60s. Now that I'm older, I can see, no, they had a lot to teach us, but it was still instilled to me, you know.
Right.
And whether these kids, college kids, and these people coming out, whether they get it or not, they'll have it instilled, and that does help change your perceptions. Because, like, when I finally admitted I was really afraid to learn how to carry a gun and learn how to protect myself, And then I came out with you, April, and you showed me very gently because you knew I had to go through all the different stages. After the first 2 times, my whole psychological makeup, even my posture changed because I thought I don't have to back away and hide from people anymore.
Right.
I
It's
just
empowering.
started walking like I can protect myself.
Absolutely.
I
Right.
don't have to be afraid and hide. And what that did for me, I want other people to experience it. Most likely, I will never have to use a gun in my life. But to not have that knowledge like I was before is not any place I want to go back to. You know? So does anybody else have any?
No, I find it's like when I first met April and her sister, I went out with them and they both were armed. It was like Charlie's Angels, you know.
Really?
I knew I was safe. I was.
Yeah.
Well, you
But
know,
that's
I
empowering.
do.
You
I
know?
have
It's
a
like-
friend who she's a liberal, but now she is interested in learning how to shoot and protect herself in that manner. And I've heard her say to people, she's like, I go out with April because she protects me.
Yeah. And see, that's going back to what I was talking about. When a person doesn't want to protect themselves or learn and they're so afraid they don't want to learn in any way, then actually what they're doing is exactly what your friend said. She's relying on you. So in other words, I know she's your dear friend, but she's sort of putting it all on you and putting you in danger.
I see, that was your point in the,
You know,
yeah.
so
But you know, I'm happy to provide a role like that.
I don't want to be in a room full of those people that are just going to rely on me for all their lives.
Yeah, no, I truly don't
And,
either.
You
but
know, I have no back. I'm not going to have any backup. You know, oh, what am I? You know,
But those people, I mean, and that unfortunately encourages bad people. You know,
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you have the worst gun crimes. I mean, without question are in the most gun restrictive places because they know that the good, honest people that would legally carry a gun are not.
yeah,
they're going to follow the law and not bring their firearm onto the premise, which
yeah,
creates a whole pool of victims, which is why they go after schools, you know, all the gun-free zones. So hopefully at some point the legislature on that would be changed, but I don't know if that
well, you know what countries have not had school shootings and things like that for like 40 years?
No,
are
Israel's one of them.
Israel
Yeah.
and Switzerland. And that's another focus I would want to talk about the next time if we have a conversation. I'd like to focus on that because they have mandatory gun training when they get out of high school for 2 years, and then they take their guns home with them. The women and the men. It's just understood. You have to learn how to protect yourself. Why is this a bad thing? These people have not had, because somebody like you were talking about, Andy, a predator that's thinking about going in to hurt somebody is going to go, you're inviting them when you're in a gun-free zone.
Criminals
They
prefer-
know this. Why do they know this and we don't know this? You know?
Well, in my lifetime, you know, in the past 30 years, you know, I mean, since I've gotten out of school, there really wasn't school shootings, and there are now. And you know, I remember when people would. I remember a kid brought his shotgun into shop class to fix the handle, and you know, I mean, there was guns around. I had access to guns. I mean, it was, you know, they always want to make the issue the guns, and I don't, you know what I mean? I don't agree. I think they're just trying to take your Second Amendment away. Is what
Yeah.
the
Or
game.
the real problem is just so much more difficult to fix. I attribute it to the breakdown of the family. The father figures aren't around. Kids are like latchkey kids. They're coming home with no parents. They're playing violent video games like constantly, and these are three of the things that most of the mass shooters in the past 10 years have had in common. And the last one, and maybe even the most important, are these psychotropic drugs they put kids on, like the antidepressants, even like the Zoloft and Prozac, and it affects their young growing mind. From what somebody said, it creates the perfect storm. You know what I mean? And they don't have the family support. They don't have friends support. They're at home. They're on these video games. They're taking these drugs that are supposed to help them out of depression or whatever, but it creates a huge problem. And that's the common factor in most of these mass shooters.
Okay, well,
But that's harder to fix. It's harder to fix that than it is to say, let's sign some new gun restrictions.
Yeah, it's harder to fix that. You're right. But we can do it.
We can do
We
it.
can do it. So, does anybody have anything else they'd like to add to that? And then we'll maybe talk the next time about these other issues with regarding Israel and Switzerland, and that they're taught from the beginning, And I'd like to see how you guys get some input on that and see.
Right. Was that just part of the first question then? Because I have some information on the second question that you had.
Alrighty. Yeah, so then we wanted to talk about those who would like to learn but are afraid to carry an instrument that would hurt someone.
Right. And on this issue, this question, it makes me think back to you, Sandy, when you first came to me and asked me for help. And, one of the first things I think I said to you was, I think if you're a woman and you want to learn how to protect yourself, a lot of the times I think women kind of feel intimidated learning stuff from men. Men get like kind of a machismo, and I don't mean to be, sexist or anything, but I feel like if you do want to learn as a woman, to find a trainer who's a woman. They have a little bit of an easier way of explaining things, and I think it can be a little bit more comfortable. You don't feel quite as intimidated, and also, there are things to think about too. It's like you want to think about what sort of gun you're comfortable operating. You don't want to go out and give somebody a 45 caliber pistol that's just learning how to shoot, and it's got a lot of recoil, it makes a lot of noise. These things are all intimidating, and so I would suggest for anybody who wants to learn how to shoot would be to start. Keep it simple, sister. The KISS, the KISS right. Mentality, I guess. But start with a revolver, which is super simple to operate. It doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles on it. You get into semi-automatics, and they've got safeties, and you need to use a slide, to get your first round into the chamber. So all of these things are things you're going to have to think about when you're in a crisis situation. And if you're not trained and you don't have that muscle memory, you're probably not going to successfully operate that gun, and likely they're going to take it from you and use it against you. And then you also want to think about things like stopping power. You want as much stopping power as you can get, but it's not going to be effective if you're afraid to use it, or if you're, you're just waiting for, you're terrified of the noise or the recoil. So even something like a little 22, not that most people would recommend that for self-protection, but it's better than throwing a rock. It's got to be something that you're going to be able to carry in your purse, that you're going to be carrying on yourself, something that you're going to feel comfortable with. So these are all things to think about if you're a first-time shooter or interested in learning. And I would definitely suggest, training courses. That's the most important thing. To feel comfortable is to develop the muscle memory. You need a good, reputable trainer. You need to practice. And all these things can help you to feel more comfortable in a situation where, you would be, panic. So that would be my suggestion on where to start. as far as somebody who wants to learn how to protect themselves.
Thanks for your input on
And
that.
I think this, I've, have had several experiences where, bullshit gets you out of more trouble than anything. And being able to think logically when a situation happens and to think, what do they want? And at least appear that you're going to give them what they want. And you, at least at that point, you set up when the situation's going to go down, or how it's going to go down, or where it's going to go down to some degree. Or you divert the whole situation. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
People are in some ways pretty simple, but if you just kind of stay in that victim mentality and are panicked, it's they see that, bad people are like sharks, they can smell it.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I think it's so intertwined, the psychology of it, and but we can't do any of the things if we don't get enough strength in our minds to get ourselves in a good place, to steady our minds so we can think the next thing through.
And you're not going to have a steady mind if you're not sure that you can operate your firearm correctly.
If
You know
you
what I mean?
don't,
So the
that's right.
first step of that is getting yourself familiar with that, because that's going to reduce a whole area of, you don't have to think about this. That's all going to come second nature if you get practice and you know what you're doing.
And I find it ironic too, the last point, is how we treat guns in this country, where it's a Second Amendment, it's a right to carry a gun. I mean, even all that aside, there is just guns in this country, and we don't teach people, a lot of people don't know how to unload a weapon.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of accidental shootings in this country. And if we, you think about how we teach children about fire safety, about fire extinguishers, about, how to use them and how to exit, just the basics of would save so many lives. But we have this, mentality where you just stick your head in the sand with guns.
Yeah.
It's amazing, and it's such a double standard. You would never do that with, a fire or...
No, well, they used to do that in school. Eddie Eagle, the NRA had Eddie Eagle, and he would come around to schools and he would teach firearm safety and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, at the turn of the century, 1900s, I'm referring to, they had programs where they were, the government was, well, you went to one of they still have that, but they actually were putting rifle ranges in schools and stuff to teach people how to shoot. That was part of, the home front, defense.
Yeah. Right. The Camp Perry up on Lake Erie, it was started by President Roosevelt. It's the Civilian Marksmanship Program. And it was designed to teach civilians how to use firearms as the military is trained. So they're all like retired military, the instructors. And the whole place is set up just to familiarize civilians, in the way that the military is familiar with using them. And so there are places like that, that are still around.
But it is amazing today how our government is totally flipped on that issue.
Yeah.
It's and that is our core value that is being erased.
That's right. And that's why the next time we talk, I'm hoping we can get together and get some views on why the people in Israel and Switzerland have this as mandatory training. And that's my goal. Mandatory.
And I was the safety chairperson at our elementary school a couple years back, because I started bringing up the issue of safety at school, And so I did a lot of research on the school shootings and, stuff like that went down and that kind of when it started happening and what's going on with these people who do these kind of things. And you know, there's a lot of information out there, and they're on the rise, you know what I mean? So it's going to continue to keep happening. So
that's another whole conversation.
Yeah.
And I can't wait till we can get together and talk about that again. So thank you so much for discussing this mind strength and all these issues with us today. And we will be coming back. Thanks again.